Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar on what's the cost of non-PCI compliance in the cloud. My name is Stellan Blum, and I will be your host for today's webinar. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Dome9, and I'm here with Ofer Elzam, VP of Product Management for Dome9 Security. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website afterwards. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We will close with Q&A at the end of the session. If you would like to ask a question, please type it in the questions window of GoToWebinar, and Ofer will address as many questions as possible, time permitting. We have also uploaded 2 reference handouts, which include our Dome9 ARC platform and Dome9 Compliance and Governance product briefs. Feel free to download this content at any time during the webinar. I want to present a little background on Ofer before we get started. Ofer Elzam is the VP of Product Management for Dome9. Ofer has over 20 years of experience in security and product management in senior level positions, working at companies that include Sophos, Cisco, ScanSafe, and SafeNet. Ofer has brought to market several innovative cybersecurity products in a variety of areas, including network firewalls, content security, and anti-malware, and holds several product-relevant patents. Prior to joining Dome9, Ofer led Sophos Network Security in the release of groundbreaking Sophos XG Next-Gen Firewall, making security simpler and extending it to the cloud. While at Cisco, he led security product strategy at a time when cloud-based security services, bring your own device, and IoT were emerging. He also served as chair of the Cisco Cross-Functional Cloud Security Working Group. Ofer is passionate about practical innovations that can make security and compliance in the public cloud more effective and easier for organizations to manage. Now we will launch into our webinar discussion today. Businesses that handle customer credit card information are required to meet the Payment Credit Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS. PCI DSS is a set of security standards designed to protect merchants and financial institutions from security breaches and theft of cardholder data. Some organizations find meeting PCI requirements overwhelming and choose to forego the process and suffer the consequences of being fined if caught. However, the true cost of non-compliance goes far beyond being monetarily punishable by law, with up to a 50% greater chance of being breached, negative brand publicity, and loss of business. With each revision of PCI, the standard becomes more stringent, requiring businesses to be compliant at all times. In the 60-minute webinar, Ofer will present what is needed to establish PCI compliance in the cloud, review established frameworks and requirements to avoid breaches and fines, present real-world examples of what not to do, and how using Dome9 for automated continuous compliance can help your organization realize PCI compliance. Without further ado, I will now pass the ball to Ofer. Let's get started.
Thank you, Stellan, for the introduction. And I hope this webinar will be informative to you and will also allow time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So let's get going. And PCI-related breach happened again. This is just recent from a couple of days ago. 880,000 payment card details were stolen in a breach on Expedia's Orbits. And this is not unusual. They were PCI compliant, which means that being PCI compliant is not even all the story, but being non-compliant is even worse. And this brings us to our relationship to PCI DSS. There's a love-hate relationship. We hate it because we think it adds complexity to our lives or expense, but we love it because it actually helps us bring focus and attention on security at the time that we're preparing for an audit. And if we use the right tools, we can see that actually it's not so bad. And in the end, we'll be more secure. Our customers will be more secure. We'll avoid fines. And this is what we're going to talk about. So why do people hate PCI DSS generally? So some people associate security with complexity and friction to users, and they assume that adding all the additional layers of security might impact the delightful user experience they want their customers to have. So they try to avoid or minimize the steps taken to be fully PCI compliant on a regular basis. Others assume that it costs a lot of money, and it can cost, of course, money, but the cost of breaches could be higher, not just by fines, but by reputation, by stolen information that might not be just car data, and so on. People assume that you have to hire, train, pay consultants, can be a lot of money, but actually we'll show you how, if using the right tools, that can be at least less complex and costly. And I've even heard statements like, I'll take the risk, I'll pay the fine if something happens. So people knowingly avoid that. They don't want to hassle. Say, okay, if there's a breach, I'll pay the fine. And we'll talk a little bit about the fines, which some people say in the industry that the fines are not high enough. Others might think that they're really overwhelmed by their infrastructure, especially as they're moving a lot of their applications and workloads from traditional data centers to the cloud. They don't have many cloud experts and architects. It's very easy to create more and more services in the cloud, and only after the fact realize, oh, now I have to deal with lots of network components, many VPCs, different teams that are building different applications. I don't know where to start. I'll just postpone my compliancy. And generally, some people just think, oh, I just need check marks and the certification logo. Doesn't really make me secure. I'm not gonna bother with it too much. And others also don't associate the requirements. For them, it's sort of a semi-legal document with different descriptions of requirements that are not immediately associated with the right real-life operations and rules. But it doesn't have to be that complex. And in the end, many people will just ignore it and not talk about it and have a general expectation that everything is going to be okay. I'm not going to be a victim. And we know that that's not how it happens. And it happens to being attacked, unfortunately, happens to many companies. Some of them are PCI compliant. And we'll talk also about why do PCI compliant companies still get penetrated and breached. So just from the last recent months, and most of these examples are PCI, under PCI compliancy requirements. Sabre Hospitality Solution, customer payment data information stolen. One login. Not sure exactly if credit card data was stolen, but AWS keys allowed attackers to use APIs from a different host, and during 5 or 6 hours, encrypted data could be decrypted and information stolen. Sonic, millions of stolen credit and debit cards. These ended up being sold in the black market on the dark web. Hyatt Hotels, credit card and debit card details stolen. Uber, 57 million user and driver records stolen from GitHub, possibly including PCI related card information. Alteryx, they have purchased data from Experian, and just like Equifax, it's a credit agency which holds a lot of information about us, even though we haven't consented to having this information there. But still, information was stolen from the data that they purchased from Experian. 120 million credit cards. This was due to exposed AWS S3 bucket that was not encrypted. So let's talk a little bit about Equifax, because this is an interesting use case of, I would say, neglect. Vulnerability was known for a long time. A breach happened at some point in May 2017. It lasted for a long time, and a lot of information was stolen. So everyone has read about it in the news. Was Equifax PCI compliant? The surprising answer is no, they were not compliant. So although they're handling a lot of information, but about they create credit scores, but they're not handling directly credit card information in front of banks and processing services, and so they were not required to do that. And this is amazing that they knowingly decided not to be compliant and leave data at rest unencrypted. These are some quotes we see here in an interaction with the CEO of the company, the ex-CEO of the company. So why weren't they compliant? So the Equifax regulatory landscape, they have a lot of other regulatory requirements related to privacy of customer information and acknowledging the data is stored to customers and other requirements, but no PCI compliance and actually no real security practices and any standards that regarding the safekeeping of data. So what can we learn specifically from the Equifax breach? First of all, if you just need to remember a few things, encrypt data, so at least even if you're breached, the risk to customer data is reduced. Patch every time there's a new vulnerability patch, and there are tools that help you identify vulnerabilities and do that. It doesn't matter if you need to be compliant or not, just do that because it's important to keep data secure. Have an incident response procedure. For them, it took days and days to just decide what to do, what to share, maybe even lie on a couple of things along the way. Because, you know, you can have a head in the sand attitude, but it does not make things go away. When you identify something happened, respond. And regarding fines, the more you delay handling events that happen and responding, you can increase the size of your fines. Although, as I mentioned previously, some people think that the fines that banks can have on you if you're found in breach are not as high as they should be. And something that we all as a security community need to do is advocate for a national cybersecurity standard and not just regulatory, not necessarily very restrictive compliance regulations. So how much does an average breach cost? $7.3 million. This number is for North America. This is the cost of the average breach. So as you know, probably there are 4 levels of merchants. The levels are by the number of transactions you're doing or the card information that you're holding. So if you're like only just 20,000 cards, it's a low bar. But even 20,000 cards being stolen is a serious problem. Many small businesses that have an online shop or have just a small apps, not a very large scale, they fall under this category, and they should be also thinking about their compliance and the tools that they need to use in order to be compliant. On a global average, the cost is 3.6 million, and of course, large breaches are biasing this number, but it's still huge. It's a lot of money. Some examples of ways people attack. There are different ways to hack, but some of the simplest that I personally have seen in the last couple of months, at least 3 times, is just collecting credentials off of GitHub. Many times we have developers developing apps and then uploading the apps, building an infrastructure in the cloud, and for convenience or lack of knowledge, lack of practice, sometimes they just keep in plain text their keys to access their AWS account, or the root account actually, in a GitHub repository where they write their code. They use it because they need to copy and paste it into code, and they don't think about the fact that even if it's there 5 minutes, they can already be breached. A very well-respected security personality also is a CEO of a security consultancy firm, admitted that, I will not give out the name, but admitted actually publicly, but I still would not repeat the name, that he himself, out of neglect and just for 5 minutes kept information in this way, and then got impacted by $500, which was a lot. It was lucky. It was not a lot of money in costs on Amazon services. So this is an example of a GitHub script that you can find. You can use it. You can find credentials for accounts. And there are bots there that are doing that all the time. This happens. So this is part of education, but there are also tools just to prevent that these roots accounts are used, or this type of credentials cannot happen to you. So, but I just wanted to give an example of how simple that gaining access could be in some cases. And the attackers, what do they do with the access? They just steal card information if you can find it. They can host spamming or phishing servers, and very much a recent trend is to spin expensive mining servers. A mining server with multiple core GPU can be up to 25, sometimes even more dollars minutes, and the cost could be tens of thousands of dollars. And I've heard about two companies, one with $25,000 that they had to lost this way, and another company $75,000 that they lost this way in a day or 2 days. And of course, other information could be stolen as well. So what exactly is the PCI DSS standard? So the payment card industry data security standard, first of all, it's not a law. It's a regulatory requirement. This is a tool that banks and credit card companies use in order to force their merchants who handle credit card information to be more secure. There's a guideline. There are a couple of controls. We'll talk a little bit about some of those controls later on that you have to follow. And if you do, it helps you be more secure. But it doesn't guarantee that you're secure. It just because you could mess up on how you do those compliancy requirements. The fines themselves, 5,000 to 100,000, depending on the type of merchant. The type 4, which handle up to 20,000 cards, they could be fined $5,000 per month. So if you're not compliant, the bank not always will enforce it and actually ask you for the money, but they can fine you these amounts. This is why some, especially smaller vendors, don't necessarily pay attention or say, okay, I will just, if I get a fine, I will pay it. And if records were breached, then there could be a fine that could be high. But then again, on the other hand, if the merchant generates a lot of money, a lot of revenue, then it's negotiable and the fines could be reduced. And maybe there's need for stricter penalties. So what does the standard actually require? So there are 12 requirements, and these evolve around information security controls and processes that include areas like how to build and maintain a secure network, protecting cardholder data, maintaining a vulnerability management program, and so on. And this is, if you read the document itself and you haven't done that before, it can be intimidating, very detailed, and not necessarily easy to understand how you can take those requirements and connect them to actually best practices that you have in the organization. And then, even if you are certified, it does not necessarily mean that you are secure. That's because audits are performed periodically, depending on the type of organization. These can be done once a year, or once a quarter, usually not more than once a quarter. In between those audits, you're exposed. Things can change the day after the audit, and now there's a new exposure that could take months to notice. Audits many times are just done remotely by an external vulnerability scan, type of a black box scan. It might be very good. It might identify risks, and then you have some time to fix them, but it might not identify all possible breaches that you might have. If you're working with a CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, DevOps environment, changes happen all the time. In DevOps, the high efficacy and the most competent IT organization were ones where we have more DevOps releases and update cycles, which means that these could be sometimes multiple per day, sometimes even tens per day, depending on the type of organization. And every such change could introduce new risks, but you still need to be continuously compliant. And the continuous compliance topic is going to be something that I'll talk about more. It's really important, especially in the cloud where things could change quickly and you have multiple development teams, and these teams find it very easy to just set up new services. So how does it look like from a global perspective of analysis? This is some data from the Verizon 2017 Payment Security Report. It's a good document to read, filled with plenty of comparable information across different types of industry and and focusing on the different controls in PCI. The important thing to take away from this is that 58.4 of the controls declined in compliance. So you don't see the 58.4% here on the chart, but what it means is that across all these compliance areas, in almost 60% of the controls themselves, so we have 12 control areas, there was declining compliancy across different industries. So what are the reasons for that? My assumption is because systems have become more complex, and the cloud have contributed to, because it's so easy to create new services and apps in the cloud, it has created increased gaps because not everything was checked regularly, and that led to this decline. So there is more awareness, but still, things are complex to manage on a regular basis. The two notable requirement area is requirement 3, which talks about protecting stored cardholder data, as mentioned previously, encrypt at rest, data at rest mostly, but there are other things that are covered there. And requirement 11, regularly test security. And again, because it's hard to do it, especially if you expect to do it manually. But now, as there are tools that can help you with that, you don't have to do all those tests by hand. So I want to be PCI compliant. What do I do? Where do I start? So if you're just starting fresh, it's always easier. So if you have a clean slate, there are tools that help you get ready for that and build a secure infrastructure, especially if you're on the cloud. Here we have an example of Amazon, AWS, building a PCI DSS compliant infrastructure on this platform, but you can do similar builds as well on Azure or Google Cloud Platform. Actually, a very good tool. You just go into your account. You can use PCI DSS template, a CFT, CloudFormation template that Amazon provides you. This is, you have a reference architecture. You have a very detailed and informative build guide. If you have a little, just moderate levels of experience, this will take you about 30 minutes. If you need to learn a lot more about how to build applications on the cloud platform, then maybe you have a little bit of a learning curve. But even if that is the case, it still won't take you too long. And they give you even an example how to create a WordPress-driven app in a fully PCI DSS compliant architecture. So you can create an e-shop or other types of services using this platform. But then you grow and you add another app. You started building one thing, and maybe you moved something from a data center into the cloud, and the first was a single app. Then you're adding another app, and this app is attached to another type of data. And then you hire someone new, and this person wants to move to the next generation of application building. And maybe you want to build it instead of VM instances, build in containers, or they want to use a Lambda function to do specific tasks that the application require, or connect to a different data source. And then customers have new requirements, and then sooner rather than later, this changes, and you still need to keep this environment secure. So if you already, and in the other hand, you might already have a network architecture, and you might even think that it's not the best designed architecture there is, but there are tools that can help you make it more secure, make it PCI compliant. There are tools that can help you pass an audit and stay compliant, and it doesn't necessarily have to be super expensive, and in the end, your customers' data is safe, your reputation is protected. And this brings us to how to be compliant with DOM 9. So DOM 9 is provides an easy PCI reporting and continuous compliance tool. So it allows you to continuously evaluate your network infrastructure. There are tools also that helps you visualize the infrastructure. So if you have issues you need to take care of, you have visual tools and information on how to fix whatever needs to be fixed. You can produce detailed PCI compliance reports for different audiences in your organization. It supports AWS, Azure, and GCP public cloud environments. It runs 24/7 with continuous compliance, so you don't have to wait before an audit or just occasionally run a scan and see if you are compliant. And it can be used by different teams, security, IT teams, auditors. They can use it for PCI. They can use the PCI results as a guideline to what they need to improve. And it provides useful capabilities for them. So I'm not going to do an introduction to the PCI compliant itself, but just talking about some of the sections that DOM 9 can help you with. So as the PCI requirements is built of different requirements, of 12 areas of requirement. Not all the areas of requirements are covered here. So first of all, you can have this information. It is available on our documentation, and it can show you exactly in which areas of compliancy requirement DOM 9 can help you. And as I will show you and demonstrate in the product, you can see that it's easy to see that in the product itself. Another thing to know about DOM 9 is that DOM 9 as a company is level 1 PCI certified. And from companies that do compliance and governance tests for public cloud environments, not many do that. And it's probably still true that DOM 9 is the only company in our category who is actually level 1 PCI certified. Do we need to? No, we actually don't need to be compliant because we don't handle credit card data. But why is it important for our customers? it has in the latest standards update, the scope of PCI has been expanded and now includes connected to or security impacting system, which means that if you're using a solution for compliance and automatic compliance, and especially solutions that can do remediation like DOM9, you need to, this solution itself needs to be PCI compliant as well. You might pass an audit even if the solution that you use is not, but it's what the standard requires. So to sum up, what are the benefits with the DOM9 tools? Can give you PCI DSS bundle. There are other bundles for other compliance standards, but important to note is that this is regularly updated. So whenever the PCI standard itself is updated, we update it with new rules. And whenever we cover more entities, more types of assets on the cloud infrastructure, we also update the rules to cover and make the coverage deeper and cover more sections for the compliancy. It provides you a dashboard with summary view of all the compliance state that you have. Of course, PCI is one of those compliancy standards tests. It provides continuous compliance with 24-hour, 7 days a week compliance runs in the background, so you can rest assured that even if you're in a change-heavy environment, you know that you always are aware if there are some fails that you need to fix. You get notified about those issues that you need to fix. The clear rules, you can read and understand the rules. You have the language of the compliancy itself, but also easy to understand practical measures that DOM9 is testing in the environment, as well as the risk level of the specific control. There's control mapping, so each rule has control mapping to a specific PCI number. As we've seen in the table previously, there are sections. So for example, if you're in requirement, key requirement area 1, then there are sub-requirements under that, 1.1, 1.1, and so on. DOM9 provides also a tool called CFT assessments. So those of you who are using CloudFormation templates on the AWS platform, DOM9 is the only solution that can test those before you even deploy. So if you just create those architectures, like the architecture guide that I showed previously from Amazon themselves, you can take this template, for example, that Amazon provides, make some changes, and then you can, before you even deploy it on Amazon, you can test it, see if there are any issues that you need to fix, and after everything is done, then you can deploy it. So it saves a lot of time. And you get notifications for any compliance findings, so you can get to dealing with them. So now let's go into a short demo. So this is the dashboard of the DOM9 tools. And as you can see, there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to talk about all the wonderful things that a DOM9 platform can do, but one of the things that you can see straight in the dashboard is different compliancy or best practice or other types of tests that you're running. You can see the results from the last run, and if it's continued compliance, of course, though, that's updated regularly. So we can immediately see a score and see the failed entities. Of course, this is a demo environment, doesn't necessarily represent a real organization where you want to be at or very close to 100% on a regular basis. And if you go to the compliancy set itself, you can see here the PCI DSS set, which includes 76 rules this, we call them bundles. You can see the list of rules. You can filter by severity. You can filter by the type of objects that you need to analyze, and different sections of the PCI standard. A note about the rules themselves. You can see the name of the rule itself, of course, the description, the remediation, so instructional information on what to fix, and you can see the PCI tags of the PCI sections. Another thing that is unique with DOM 9, some other tools for compliancy either give you black box objects of a rule, but you don't really have access to the rule itself, and you cannot change it. Some solutions, if you can modify a rule, you will have to deal with a Ruby or a Python script, which could be anywhere from 30 to 100 lines of code, which means that you also have to have a coder or a programmer to just walk through this with you, or if you need to modify it for some reason. With DOM 9, we developed something we call GSL, Governance Specification Language. It's a unique language done in partnership with a professor from the University of San Francisco. And this is using a language that is close to human language, so anyone almost can very easily understand what this group means. You can just read the group, and this is what you see here as GSL. So you can see the list of rules that we have. We have plenty of rules. And when we run the assessment, we can select the environment, which means which cloud account, the regions that we want to test on, and even specific VPCs. We also have the option here to assess a CFT. So we can upload a template and do that before deployment. And there's no other solution that can do that, and it can save a lot of time. So let's just run on all the accounts. This takes just a few seconds. And we have now a dashboard with some statistics about the compliancy. And we have the findings, a list of findings. So this in itself, and of course you can export this to CSV, or you can print that. And if you scroll down and you look at all the findings, you can see that you can filter those to focus on just specific. Let's say I'll just focus on high. And again, this is a demo environment, does not necessarily reflect a real life situation. And I see, let's take the top one. I see exactly what has failed. I see the PCI section 1 and section 10. And I can expand. I can see information about this specific violation. I have information of what to do here with that. This is regarding VPC flow logging should be enabled. VPC flow logs are not enabled by default, and they have to be turned on per VPC. And there's a requirement to log information. So the section 1 talks about managing a firewall. Section 10 talks about monitoring and auditing. So and I have information here, and this is a user guide actually from Amazon on how to turn about flow logs. But it's just very simple to just turn them on. But you might have not noticed that maybe there's a developer created a new stack for an app and needed to and didn't turn on the VPC flow logs. Immediately you know that. Then you can even explore further. You can see a list of the IDs, specific IDs of the entities. You can see the information and then do some additional analysis on these objects. Okay, you see the VPC, and this is the VPC that we need to turn the flow log on. Saves a lot of time. You don't necessarily have to bring very expensive consultant in order to do that. So this is the compliance report. You can always turn on continuous compliance rules. In the rules, you can create various policies by selecting specific bundles, and we want the PCI DSS. We select the environment we want to run this on. We can select multiple environments if needed. And when do we want to send the report, who the recipients are, if we want a full report or just the changes. We can send also SNS notifications, so this could be integrated into other systems and so on. So very flexible way to manage the notifications. And we also have history of runs that we have, and we can pick specific runs from the history and see what happened in a previous point of time, and then create also benchmarks and comparison information. So let's go back to the demo, from the demo to the presentation. I just wanted to share another some more information. These are some of the resources that I've took information out of and recommended for you to check. The Verizon 2017 Payment Security Report, Deloitte Compliance Trend Survey, the Amazon Guide to Building Secure PCI DSS Architectures. And if you go to the Dome9 link that you see below, we have a blog post on how to achieve PCI compliance in 4 easy steps. So recommended reading. And now we have time for some Q&As.
Great. Thank you, Ofer. It looks like you have received a few questions. The first one is, does Dome9 cover all PCI requirements?
So Dome9 covers some, I would say even most of the PCI requirements, but does not cover all PCI requirements because there are some of them are not relevant. So given an example, physical security. We don't have, of course, access to physical sites, so that's irrelevant. Another example is running an AV. So we don't run anything on the hosts themselves on machines. So we're not necessarily compliant with as a solution to run an antivirus on the specific hosts. However, what we recently added is the ability to get information from other host running tools. So for example, if any customer of ours is using AWS Inspector, which allows to run different types of scans using an Amazon agent on instances, the findings can be analyzed by Dome9, and we already added some of those into our tests in various bundles, PCI as well as others.
Great. We have another question. Is PCI DSS the most comprehensive security standard?
So good question. Not necessarily. So there are a bunch of other standards. NIST 800-53 is probably the most comprehensive. And even those standards are regularly being updated. We expect to have update on the NIST compliance or framework. Actually, it's not compliance or standard. It's a framework for compliancy. So we expect that to be enhanced in the next year. The PCI DSS itself is expected to be revised in 2019 and become more comprehensive. I would say that NIST is a bit more comprehensive, and you can run it just as another check if you want. We offer a couple of compliance bundles. We also have best practice bundles, CIS benchmarks for AWS, for Azure, and so on. So these provide a set of very good best practices specifically tailored for the cloud. So you can run a couple of them. PCI is pretty comprehensive, but others can complement it. And of course, the number one goal should be secure.
Great. We have another question. For an organization who is not dealing with credit cards, is it important to be PCI compliant?
So, as I mentioned previously, if we take Dome9 as an example of such an organization, Dome9 does not deal directly with credit card information, but we are in the chain of customers who do deal with such data. And as a result, and from interpretation of the updates to the PCI standard in 2016, we decided it's important for us to be compliant, and it was a big effort for us to be compliant ourselves with high standard of control, which we maintain regularly. I recommend it if organizations are in the chain of providing services to other companies that do have to be PCI compliant, to consider that.
Okay, it looks like we have a final question here. What are the cost tiers for Dome9, and what can clients expect to pay?
So the best way to see our prices, and actually it's really easy, there are two ways that you can immediately start purchasing a Dome9. First of all, you can start with an evaluation, and you can get 14 days evaluation and see how the tool works for you. And we have a team that can help you if you need help on doing the assessments and preparing. We can purchase Dome9 from the marketplace, the AWS marketplace, and you have pricing there that sort of pay as you go, flex pricing plans. We also have now plans for customers with number of assets that are less than 250. So you can check these plans as well. They're called the core plans, and you can find the pricing information on our website. Larger accounts, they have sometimes more comprehensive requirements, and usually we come up with a pricing strategy that fits their needs.
Great. Well, thank you, Ofer. This concludes the Q&A section of the presentation today. All right, everyone, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending. If you have any further questions on the information presented today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via the email q&a@dome9.com. I have a few final notes. If you enjoyed the webinar presented today and would like to experience the Dome9 Arc platform for yourself, we're offering a 14-day free trial. Please visit our website at www.dome9.com and click on the Get Started button on our home page. Just register, and a representative from Dome9 will contact you to activate your free trial. Additionally, if you liked the webinar today and would like to hear more about the multi-cloud security and compliance solutions Dome9 provides, please visit the resources page on our website and sign up for several of our upcoming webinars, or go to www.dome9.com/webinars. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, please contact us through our website and let us know. With that, we thank you for your time today and hope you found the content informative. This now concludes the Dome 9 webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.